Hey y'all, welcome back. I've got a new episode for you, a little bonus episode. This one's going to be a bit shorter than the others. About an ongoing issue in Atlanta that relates both to the environmental issues we discussed in the last episode as well, environmental geography, as well as its impact on economics, politics, and the environment itself. An issue that's been in national media in some form or another, really over almost the last 2 years, has gotten quite a lot of attention. You may be familiar with what they call the Stop Cop City movement, or the deforestation of the Weelaunee/South River Forest, and discuss the impacts of deforestation, policing, and climate change. Earlier over the summer, I spent a fair bit of time out there, and I got to thinking, how could I teach this within the context of the Georgia geography standards for high school geography? Now, I will say I never got to teach this. It is not fully realized. I'm not really 100% sure what to do with everything yet, but I figure with these assets and resources, some of y'all might be able to. I will have these links, resources, and PowerPoint available for free on my Teacher Pay Teachers page, which I will put up. I'll put in the comments here. But let's see what we can come up with, what we're doing here. So the overarching issue here is that the Atlanta Police and the city of Atlanta want to create an 85-acre police training facility, state-of-the-art, urban warfare, and even fire training as well, within the middle of this particular region. We're going to take a look at some more specific maps that have come out over the last year or so. But the area in question here is largely this triangular sort of shape. There's some other construction projects of issue going on here, but we're really going to be focusing on this police training facility. So I mentioned the Georgia standards. What standards would we be pulling from if we were to teach this sort of thing in the classroom? Same ones from the last episode, actually. Economic, political, and environmental impact of natural resource management, and in this case, deforestation. As well as local government responses to the ecological and environmental disaster that these sorts of things can bring when you are not caring. Again, I use Dr. Golnasar Mohammed's pursuits. Here are 4 of them to organize the sort of guiding questions or the material we want them to land on. The skills here is we're going to create our own layers of GIS, geospatial or geographic information systems, of analyzing heat index maps, tree canopy coverage, demographic maps. And we could even throw in there not just racial demographics, but also class demographics. What's the home value of the area? And if we were to take those 4 things, what might we find? The intellect portion is a bit of history about South Atlanta and the environmental impacts of deforestation. You know, what happens when you destroy large swaths of forest. Identity, how would this impact your neighborhood, and how would you have input on this issue? Again, it does ask about political impacts. How does it mobilize populations for or against something, right? We'll talk about the Stop Cop City movement. We're also referencing the stakeholders committee who are really committed to this ecological destruction. And criticality, great way to introduce environmental racism. In this case, we're going to use heat index as a measure of discrimination, but really the long-standing features of the legacy of segregation and redlining, how when communities are Black and poor, a lot less ecological consideration goes into the development and maintenance of that area. Lots of different examples on that one. So let's take a look here. We always want to begin with little media literacy. I have here a whole bunch of headlines from mainstream and local media really over the last year and a half. Really comprehensive overview. If you were to read all of these, have a pretty good understanding of what is going on about who wants what, which parties are interested in what. We've got the New Yorker, the Supporter Report, the Guardian, the Intercept, CNN, AJC, which is the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and Rolling Stone as well. The CNN one we're going to go over very briefly, but the New Yorker article was also very comprehensive in that they reach a large spectrum of interest, from the City of Atlanta government to activists who are living in the woods right now and tree defenders, to the people who live in that neighborhood and how they feel about it. As well as some of the ones that are a bit more sympathetic to the police and the developers. So having students look at these, I might ask them to say, okay, based on these national headlines, what are some of your takeaways? How is this being framed in media discussions? What's the look here? I might also ask them, can you tell which headlines are less sympathetic to the people who are opposed to the forest? Can you tell who's framing it what way? Who's taking which sides? And there's more to that. I believe the head of the AJC also has vested interest in this project as well. Don't quote me on that, but there's more to that. So things think of media literacy, right, is always a good way to start. So I'm going to go over each of these, and then we're going to go through the citations. Again, I haven't really fully realized the task, but these citations here could be used to create a DBQ, if you will, document-based questions or video-based questions. Maybe doing what we call a flipped lesson, where you give the kids the assets and the resources first, maybe some questions to go with it, let them in groups figure some stuff out, and then you as the teacher facilitate a conversation after they've sort of, I don't want to say taught themselves the material, but have adequately explored the material. So the environmental geography elements here, this forest is actually considered one of the 4 lungs of the metro area. I'll show you a map of that later from a 2017 City of Atlanta development project. It is pretty important to the city as a whole, even if it is, you know, a lot of them are sitting on the peripheries of the city, and how forests are a part of our air cleaning process. We've got citizen scientists have documented over 150 plus flora and fauna throughout the area. Of course, you know, what is a citizen scientist? That might be fun to bring up as well, that you don't need a college degree necessarily to know what the hell you're talking about with something, that the knowledge is there. As well as a local, sort of some of the local political battles within DeKalb County. Even though it is the Atlanta Police Foundation, DeKalb County is the adjacent county, and part of this forest large portions of this forest would be entirely in DeKalb County. We'll go over that in a moment. Heat index, will show you a GIF from the U.S. Geological Survey. Be super cool, and unfortunately, these resources are expensive, but if you could have handheld infrared, you know, with that nice purple to yellow spectrum to measure heat, and to be able to let kids use that both in the classroom or outside, those sorts of things would be a lot of fun. But again, they are expensive. And this link here from the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Forest Services, which this was published back in April, of the legacy of redlining and tree canopy. The next lesson in general ed, Kids Deserve Geography 2, we're actually going to talk about white flight and gentrification. But redlining as the sort of predecessor to all that, and how that legacy still exists today of less tree coverage in poorer and blacker areas, and less investment by city resources to maintain that. And what is the impact both of the home value, sure, but the quality of life if your neighborhood is a hotspot, is physically hotter because they refuse to put trees there. And maybe even opportunities to discuss the difference between forests and parks. Yes, forests stop flooding, and so do parks act as sponges, but what other impacts do forests have that parks just don't? Because one of the big claims is that they want to create, you know, conservationist area and public parks, and that's nice. But a lot of parks, they don't have trees, or they do, but you know, still big wide open swaths that don't fulfill the same ecological need. So let's go through some of these resources where I got them from. We always want to cite our sources. This is the CNN article that I mentioned about public safety training facility, or Cop City, depending on who you are. Some great maps here to go through, some great interviews to go through as well. Again, the mayor of Atlanta and the Police Foundation are also mentioned here, in addition to the people who live in the area and the people who are living in the forest, defending the forest right now. So this would be a great one, maybe for kids to read, if you could break it up into pieces or even just highlight some of the excerpts. This one would be comprehensive, as was the one from the New Yorker. I mentioned a slideshow from 2017 by the City of Atlanta. This is just one of the slides here. There are lots of great maps and resources if you could go through all of this, including 3D images and satellite images of different portions of the city. But the South River is one of the four major lungs and one of the more densely populated, densely tree populated. There's more trees here than others. There's also a local high school right next to the forest, right down the street as well. And many of those students in their communities live around this woods, around this forest. So this is a great asset to go through. Those pictures that I pulled off are right from the Defend the Atlanta Forest website. The citizen science, they even logged 150 plus flora and fauna. If this were a biology class or even a geography class, how great would it be to be able to take a whole bunch of kids to the forest? Here's this list, get lost in the woods and find what you can find. That would be a lot of fun. Might be asking a lot of public school systems to be willing to let you do that. But that's one sort of way for all this data to be culminated in a task. Would be a field trip to do that sort of thing. This actually just came out about an hour or two before I started recording. One of the local commissioners in the county had put forth a resolution to do a deeper study of the ecological impact of removing 85 acres of forest. Of course, the stakeholders who are deeply sympathetic to police are not interested in doing anything like that, unless, of course, they get to call forest offenders eco-terrorist. And a lot of the other commissioners really can't come to an agreement, so this is about rescinding it. And it's not the first time that he's tried to do this either. So again, political impacts, as that part of the standard is, people don't agree, does anything really move forward at all using electoral politics? Might be a question to explore. So I'll leave that there as well. Here is a GIF from the U.S. Geological Survey of Atlanta. This is from 2019. But, what do you see? What do the different colors mean? Why do you think the red gets, what breaks up the red there in between the yellow and the green? And what might this tell us? What conclusions can we draw about a place given a heat map? The forest in question is actually just south of here. I wish this was a little bigger or you could explore otherwise. But yeah, this is Atlanta on a regular, not cloudy day. 2019, this image, U.S. Geological Survey. There it is. Surface temperature. Though if you wanted to get a more local and precise, this is an older CNN article, they talk about a couple of cities, not just Atlanta. But again, using these sorts of handheld infrared or expensive but pretty compact technologies, I thought this would be fun to let the kids see that, and how can we use this information to better design our neighborhoods and communities and cities? And what does this tell us? This sort of thing. And of course, this one here is the press release from the Forest Services about the research paper that was written to show that 80 years later, the legacy of redlining and lack of tree canopy go hand in hand. And that many of these neighborhoods still have less trees than, say, wealthier white neighborhoods in suburban areas. Mm-hmm. So that's the environmental portion. I encourage you to check out all those resources. We'll take a look next at the human geography elements here. This image is from a 2015 New York Times article using the inter-decade census data from that point. That's actually where this link goes here. This is the census tract. Then the forest that we've been talking about is right here in this little triangle. Blue dots are black, green dots are white, the yellow dots are Hispanic, and the red dots are Asian. The dots don't necessarily mean there's a house there, but just how many families, depending on how zoomed in, or I think it was like 20 or 40 families per dot in that region. This area, of course, you can look at the demographics here. Again, this one's 2015, but for the actual assignment that I'm going to give them, we use the 2020 data. It's a little bit different. There's actually a couple hundred people were not counted for this most recent census. But demographics and the legacy of segregation, always good time to talk about why are there historically black neighborhoods in the first place, and redlining as a predecessor to white flight. Today, in the early 1900s, this area was largely inhabited by indigenous Muskogee who were ethnically cleansed for the white settler population, settler colonialism of the 1820s and 30s, who themselves, the Muskogee population, were the indigenous stewards, in many places still are the indigenous stewards. of things like the South River Forest, the Weelaunee Forest, excuse me. We'll take a look at the 2020 census data as well in a moment. And also community research. What do different communities have to say? This is an asset here from September 2021 made by several organizations that's cited at the bottom there, where they interview multiple zip codes that are within proximity to the forest, nearly 400 people. And wouldn't you know, as many of the other articles that I mentioned earlier at the beginning have referenced, hours upon hours and pounds and just layers and layers of discontent from the locals about this sort of project and its very shady ways that they went about it. So this is a great asset here about what people might want to actually do with it. And if you were to click here, you could actually, where is it? There it is, the results. Who said what to what questions and where they are. And what did you know? Most of the people in the area don't want it. And the most people who do want it are the people who don't live immediately in the area. But what is the value of collecting that sort of, how do you collect that sort of data? What do you do with it? And how can you use that to make your case and to push back against interests that might not care about the facts? So I'll leave that in, that's in the resources as well. Okay. So what to do with all this information? This here is, you know, the sort of ideal circumstances. Some of these resources might not be available, but giving them the task, you know, big on authentic assessment, take something home, and how does this idea you learned about in class, how does it work in the real world? And to create a photo log of canopy coverage. That is to take a photo of your neighborhood and where you live and what's it look like. And then maybe an opposing photo, that is if you live in an area with a lot of canopy coverage, what's another place in your life you spend a lot of time where there isn't a lot of canopy coverage? In two different photos. This second one here is what I mean when, you know, it might not be attainable, but how do you get infrared or temperature images of your street? That could be really difficult to acquire if you don't have the assets or resources. Thermometers on smartphones are not reliable assets. I would not recommend that. But if they could, and if you had those resources in some way, find some way to acquire that, what does it look like on the street level? What does your street look like in terms of heat measurement, and if you have a high canopy coverage? But what we can do to help layer that information is using the 2020 census data, which I'll bring up in a moment, as well as acre value or even county resources to get the demographics, but also the values of those homes and what is their relationship to the density of canopy coverage, and to create some sort of log of your own community or home that way. This is the 2020 demographic data viewer. This is the same census tract I had earlier. I've got it set to African American because that is the vast majority of this particular tract here, and a lot of South Atlanta, as you can see the dark green here. This region has actually decreased about 300 people since the 2015 map that we looked at in the slide there. But the percentages are about the same of the breakdown of who's living there. This is a little bit lower here than it was initially, but not huge difference. So this was the task that I had come up with. Might have to give them a couple of days to do it, at least to do 1, 3, and 4 here, and to create a little log, maybe even create a template of what that log looks like. I don't know how fancy you want to make it. So that would be the environmental portion. Of course, one of the standards was the political impact. You could make it about calling your representatives, whether it's the mayor or the CEO of your county or your explicit commissioner or an explicit department, things that you could do. Now, of course, if you open this up in a classroom, you are also opening up the realities that some kids might be supportive of it, right? Might be supportive of cops destroying 85 acres of forests regardless. And, you know, you got to be real that you open that sort of thing up. As well as using these sorts of resources for, you know, community organizing. This actually just went up earlier today. I'll let you take a look at that on how you can acquire that sort of information. All right, that was all I really had today. I just wanted to throw this at you, what one could do with all this information. And maybe you want to get someone in your life a little more informed on it. Hopefully these assets and resources might help you be able to better explain that. Would love to know your thoughts in the comments. Again, I will put the resource up where you can get this slideshow for free, as well as the links and other materials. And until then, keep on about geography, and to remember that general ed kids deserve geography too. Till next time.